The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. And finally, you'll get a free recorded audio training that will install unbelievable attitudes for success and wipe out any limiting beliefs. So if you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Welcome to the Influencer's Edge. This is the place where you come to get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques to leapfrog over the pack in sales, persuasion, and influence. Be sure you visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now sit back, tune in, and enjoy today's episode. All right, welcome back to the Influencer's Edge. We are always unedited, so as you can see, we're having some technical issues. I spilled coffee on my computer, yay! So this computer is improperly configured, but we're going to make up with a genius guest today. I say this because I read his book. It totally blew my mind. It's a completely different approach to selling than my own, and then anything else I've ever said. Ever seen is completely unconventional, and that's why we love him, because he's cutting edge and contrarian, completely against the common advice you get. So I want to welcome Jeremy Miner. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks for having me on your show. I'll take all of that as a compliment because my kids say I'm pretty boring. So
I think that's a low dodge. Either that's not true, your kids don't understand.
Oh, definitely true for sure.
All right, so let me read your biography.
Sure.
So the single most effective way to sell anyone is to become a problem finder and problem solver, not a product pusher. I love that distinction. You're a problem finder, not a product pusher. I love it. It's alliterative. For Jeremy, the embodiment of this philosophy made him one of the wealthiest sales professionals on the planet. During his 17-year sales career, he was recognized in the direct selling industry as the 45th highest earning producer out of the 800 million salespeople selling anything worldwide. What's the strangest thing you've ever sold, Jeremy? Let's start by departing from your bio.
The strangest thing I've ever sold?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. The 4 industries, though, I sold in 4 industries in my 17-year career before I retired and started 7th level. First industry, I was in door-to-door. That was my first job. Like while I was in college, I sold alarm systems door-to-door.
Wow.
The second, did that about 5 years. The second industry I was in, I went right into like B2B. From door-to-door to B2B, a bit of a transition, but picked that up quickly with what I knew about the brain and all that stuff, how it works. And I got into like debt relief services, primarily to SMB, but quite a few enterprise level organizations. Debt relief services, was in there for, almost 6 years, something like that. Then I got into network marketing. So went back to like B2C sales, made a ton of money there, some would say. And then my last sales job, the last about 3.5 years before I retired, was in what's called like the high ticket industry.
Yeah.
I sold like financial, like investing events for anywhere from 25 grand to 50 to 100 grand to some companies, but mainly a B2C audience. Now that was it. Those are the 4 industries I sold in.
I want to pause you on something, because you said, I always see when guests drop gold nuggets, they often go right past them. They don't even know that they're dropping them. So I want to pause you there. You said based on your knowledge of how the brain works. So let's unpack. What do you mean by your knowledge of how the brain works? And tell us
Is this
Yeah.
neuroscience, or what does that
Well,
mean?
I'm still learning. I'm ever learning, always learning new things. If you're not learning, you're going backwards. But when I went to college, so what my major when I was in school was behavioral science and social dynamics, which is really the study of the brain and how a human being, like if you break it down, it's really the study of brain and how do human beings make decisions. Why do they say yes instead of they say no? Why does your spouse get upset at you for not taking out the trash when your last girlfriend you're with for a long time, in your example, I'm just making something up, she didn't care at all if you took out the trash or not? So what is the social dynamic of that? Like what causes the brain from one human being to act this way compared to the brain of another human being? So that's the study of social dynamics. So I had probably an unfair advantage when I got into selling because the quote unquote sales gurus that the company would have us learn from, they give us the books, read the books, and take the courses and those type of things. They basically were saying that the best way to sell, communicate was over here, whereas my professors in university and what I was learning from the way the brain works, they basically said the most persuasive way was over here. So we're talking like exact opposites, okay? And one of the professors that I studied from was a guy by the name of Robert Cialdini. You ever heard of Robert?
Yeah.
Cialdini. So he wrote a book called Persuasion and
Study
Influence.
the man himself.
There's one of my professors, yeah.
Holy shite. Amazing.
There you go. A lot of other professors. I took a lot of online classes back in the early 2000s. That's kind of when the whole online thing was coming on board. So I was crazy. Like I would take classes outside of my degree just because I would just thirst for more knowledge. So that's where I started learning about the brain and how human beings make decisions. And then I started like, okay, the sales gurus are saying it's over here, and I would use some of their techniques and things they would say, and I would notice some of them would work, and I would make some sales, but I also noticed a lot of the things they were saying to do actually would cause prospects, because I would see this reaction from their body language and their tone, would cause them to like close down emotionally, stay surface level. When I asked good questions, they would give me vague, generalized surface level answers. And I learned that a lot of their techniques actually triggered what's called, well, what I call sales resistance, which actually causes them to emotionally shut down, which actually triggers uncertainty in their brain, which causes you to get the objections that you hate getting. So I'm like, how do I eliminate that resistance? How do I get them from the very first words out of my mouth to let their guard down? I call that disarming, always be disarming. How do I get them to let their guard down where they want to engage, they want to open up and actually tell me what's really going on? So I learned how to do that, and the rest is history, as they would say.
I have two thoughts that come up as you speak, speaking into what you say. It was one of the great marketing gurus who I studied with. Maybe it was Dan Kennedy, Dan.
Yeah.
I think Dan,
but I know you're talking about,
Dan said something along the lines of people don't buy from the person who presents the best solution first. They buy from the person who understands the problem first, the person who has the correct diagnosis.
Yes. It's just like you buy what your doctor gives you every time because they diagnose you and you trust the diagnosis, right? Because, there's a whole lot more to that. But so many salespeople, and it's not their fault. That's what they were trained to do. Not their fault. But like we always say here, it is their problem. That's the issue, right? And sometimes we just don't know. And I always ask, like when I'm doing a keynote or maybe I'm doing a virtual event or something with salespeople or business owners, I ask like, what's the biggest problem in sales? And they're like, not good enough leads, don't know how to close, don't know the right questions. And I'm like, okay, those are probably all problems. But the biggest problem in sales is the problem that you don't know you have. Because if you don't know that you have a problem, that's impossible for you to ever know what to do to actually solve a problem you didn't know it existed. So sometimes when we get into these keynotes and stuff and we talk about this, I think it triggers people to be like, oh my gosh, I never really thought about selling that way. I've always thought about it transactional, adversarial, me against the prospect, trying to win them over, manipulate them so I can make money. That's what average salespeople do in our day and age. Whereas we would train them that selling, like if you want to be a top 1% earning salesperson industry, you got to view selling as more collaborative, like you working with the prospect to actually help them find and solve problems so they can get the results they want to get. And I think like Dan said, because I actually just came back from a mastermind from one of his business partners, Russell Brunson. You know Russell Brunson?
Of course, for the funnel.
Yeah, ClickFunnels. So we're a part of like this mastermind. There's like, I think 15 or 20 business owners. You have to be doing a certain amount of revenue per year to even pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars to be in the mastermind. But I've got to know Russell a lot, me and my CEO and our chief revenue officer going to these events here the last year. And he always talks about Dan. And, you know, one thing he talks about Dan is Dan would say, probably relanguage that and say like, people buy from the company or the person who they feel understands their unique situation the most. It doesn't matter about price, it doesn't matter about cost. They buy if they feel you understand their unique, notice I said unique, because everybody feels like they're unique, situation the most, because they feel like the company, the salesperson, the marketing ad who understands their unique situation can get them the best result. So they're always willing to pay more to get the best result, if that makes sense.
It makes fantastic sense. Now, I'm not going to get, you have so much to contribute. If you don't mind, I'm not going to continue.
I'm not that cool, but thanks for the compliment.
Oh. So let's start out by talking, before you begin this process of selling, before you start asking questions, your mindset going in, because everyone asks me when I teach about sales, and I'm very narrowly niche, but we'll get
right.
What is your mindset going in to
our mindset's probably different than most sales training you've ever gone through, because most sales training, because I've, over the past, 23 years of me starting as a salesperson when I was 21, 22, and then we started 7-Level about 4.5 years ago. I've either read or listened to 5 books a month. I'm a fanatic on this. 5 books a month, read or listened to, right? I use my car, like Brian Tracy would say, is university on wheels. Like I don't even listen to music, right? I just throw it out, right? So I've either read or listened to 5 books a month times 12 months a year. So that's like 60 books a year times 23 years. So it's like 1,400 some books, sales, persuasion, influence. I've probably taken they counted up how many courses I've taken from my earlier days that I kept record of compared to the last 5 years. I've taken like 180 some courses on sales, persuasion, influence. So I know a little bit about it. And I was in the trenches for 17 years and did somewhat decent. And so in all of that knowledge, the biggest thing is that sales training in general, okay, I'm sure there's a few that don't, but in general, they're teaching you that you have to do all the work, right? You got to do all the work. You got to do all the selling. You got to do the convincing. You got to do all the persuading. You got to overcome their objections with rebuttals. You got to close, close, close. Now you can do that. You're just unfortunately going to have to play the numbers game.
Absolutely.
Okay? Just go through a ton of numbers, work your little butt off to like get where you're at, but it can't get you any higher than that. Like you're going to be capped, right? So with our mindset, with my mindset of sales, is I was more focused on the skills game rather than the numbers game. Now, what do I mean by the skills game? Well, what questions am I asking when I actually talk with the prospect? How am I using my tone to get them to let their guard down? How am I seeding certain things in their mind as I'm asking different questions and saying things in that sales process that prevent most of the objections from happening in their mind? So I'm playing more of the skills game. That's how I grew up on selling, because I'm more focused on the quality of each conversation rather than just quantity and numbers of trying to get through to as many people as I could. So I even started doing that when I was door to door selling alarm systems when I was a 21-year-old kid, and the average rep would have to knock on like, a couple hundred doors and get their, slammed in their face to make a deal. Whereas like I literally could talk to like 5 people and close 4 of those 5. And so I'm working like 4 hours, closing 4 times as many as the guy working 12 hours who's focused on the numbers I'm more focused on the skill game, right? So in our training and how my mindset is your prospects are the ones who have the problems, right? Not you. You don't have the problem. They have the problems. Now, they have the problems or the emotional needs, right? Your solution solves those problems and or emotional needs. So why are you doing all the work when they're the ones that have the problems and you're the one that actually has the keys to solve those problems? So what we train salespeople is how to get the prospect to do all the work, how to get the prospect to sell themselves, how to get the prospects to persuade themselves, how to get the prospects to overcome their own concerns, and how to get the prospects to pull you in.
I love
Make selling really, really easy compared to all this numbers, hustle, muscle. I mean, I love the concepts. I just, so much easier to sell that way. You just make a lot more money. Help more people too.
those are good outcomes. So those are really great outcomes.
I never understood the way everybody else viewed sales. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, they're the ones that have the problems, not me. I'm the one that can solve them. So why am I doing all the work? They should be doing all the work.
Let me drop something on your plate. And
Sure.
A couple of balls.
Throw me a curveball, man. Throw me knuckle curve, change up, maybe a slider here and there.
I've heard of question-based selling before, but I read your book, Seven. Forgive me.
I know what you're talking about. You got what's called we market everywhere on Facebook and IG. You'll probably be retargeted now for 10 years, man. You're going to see our ads everywhere. So I think what you bought is the Black Book of NEPQ questions. Now, that's just a generic version of NEPQ, which is it stands for Neuro-emotional persuasion questioning. That's the methodology I invented from my background in behavioral science. But I think that's the book you got for like, what, $20 or something?
Yes, it's genius.
It's not, it's just, I'm going to tell you, thank you for the compliment. We keep that very generic because we train 158 different industries. So we have to make that book like very, very generic. It is good, but it's more like tips. It's not really like training like our virtual training courses, but thank you for the compliment. I do take that as a compliment.
So let me ask you this. Why do you name it 7 levels? What is that?
Not many people have ever asked me that. So
my mom drowned the stupid kids, Jeremy.
I've had I was on in 2022, I did like 150 some podcast. I think one person asked me that. And this year I've honed it down. I think this year I've done like a third of that because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm podcasted out. But 7th level, so I'm a crazy dude. Besides reading Sales Persuasion Influence, I read a lot of history. So I'm like a history fanatic. I'm just weird like that. I love the History Channel. The 7th level, besides my background in behavioral science and social dynamics, in college, I also took a lot of courses on New Testament Christianity and Judaism. I know I'm weird. I love studying world religions. I love it.
Have these same interests. So if you have the same interests as me, you're special. Not weird.
Hey, thank you very much. So I don't study like I do, persuasion influence because I'm a sales trainer. We have a sales training company, but still, it's like my hobby. It's what I like to do in my time off work, I guess. So in ancient Judaism and early Christianity, and when I say early Christianity, I mean the time before like the 4th century with the rise of Roman Catholicism, where you had like the early apostolic fathers of the church that were trained by the apostles, and then they trained from the apostles, and those bishops trained those bishops. And this was long before the Catholic Church, the Council of Nicaea, all that kind of stuff. Okay, if you're familiar with like the Nicene Creed and all that. And the earliest Christians believed, and the early Jews believed, that when you died, okay, after you went through like paradise or this, they called it the spirit world or whatever, when you were resurrected, you would go into, there's 7 levels of heaven. I'm not kidding you not. This is crazy. It's very different than like traditional Christianity now, where there's like a heaven and a hell. So the early Christians believed that there were 7 levels of heaven. And at the 7th level, that is where actually God dwelled himself. And you could only obtain that level if you became perfected in him. Like if you kept his commandments, you repented of your sins, you believed in his son, Jesus Christ, you would only obtain that level and become like him, more, perfected like him, like morally, all that kind of stuff, if you were really good on earth. I mean, there's a lot more to it, right? And so the 7th level, implies that you become perfected. So I took 7th level, perfection in the art of sales, persuasion, and influence. So that's how I tied that in. That's it. I know.
Very, very, very good. So let's
So
dive.
I'm hoping when I pass away that I'm good enough to at least get to the 1st level. That's what I'm going for.
Let's. You said also something interesting. You said everything you're saying is interesting, but Chris Voss. Have you heard of Chris Voss? He wrote.
I have, yeah. I've read his. I don't know how many books he has, but I read a book about negotiation from him. I split the difference, or never split the never split the difference. I think so. It's called. It's a good book. Yeah.
He's a former FBI hostage negotiator. He talks about back when he was negotiating hostage takers and really getting them out of there. He used what he called his late night FM DJ voice to talk.
I remember that. Yeah.
When you talk about tone, is it something similar?
Yeah. So your tone is actually where most of the sales made. Most people never think about. Salespeople are really never trained. Now, you'll read a book and it'll say 73% of the sales from your verbal and nonverbal skills, but then nobody teaches you like how to actually do that, right? It's like very rare. So typically we teach that there's really 4 types of tone, okay? Because your tone is how your prospect interprets the intention behind what you're saying or asking, like Chris said. So his, the people he's trying to talk to, the way he's using his tone is how they're interpreting why he's saying what he's saying or why he's asking it, right? So let me give you an example outside of sales. Let's say you're upset at your teenager. If you start yelling and your hands are out like this, you're yelling like this, they're going to interpret that as what? You're angry, you're pissed, you're mad, right? Now, let me change something here. And we're not even talking about tone. This is more body language. I'll go back to tone. But if I simply start yelling the same way and put my hand on my chest and I'm yelling, what would that typically imply to my teenager?
That indicates that you care, that you're open-hearted, that this is your way of communicating your honest truth to them without blame or attack.
That I'm disappointed in them for doing what they did, but they don't feel like I hate them or I'm mad at them. And they might think I'm mad, but I'm doing it in a way as a father, as I'm disappointed in them, simply by putting my hand on my chest instead of like this. Is it? See, that's just one little thing, right? So that's more body language. But going back to tone, that's how the prospect interprets why you're saying something or what it means. So there's a curious tone. Okay, so I might, let's say if I'm selling, I'll try to give you something. Let's say if I'm selling, I work for a marketing agency. I'm just going to throw it out there. I was just working on this a minute ago. So if I'm selling marketing services to a company, better leads, higher quality leads, and I want to start asking what are called situation questions to help them and me find out what their real situation is. So I might lean in and say, John, can you walk me through, like, what do you guys use now to generate new leads and clients so I have more understanding? See, that's a curious tone, right? Now, the prospect is interpreting my question as he's asking me this because he's curious. So because they feel I'm curious, they tend to open up. But if I ask that same question in like an assumptive, like salesy tone, or I'm really excited tone, they might interpret that as, oh, he's asking me that to try to sell me.
I love what you said, pause button. You just said something genius. Yeah. You said if you ask it in an excited tone. And when I teach, too much enthusiasm will kill a sale.
100%. Yeah.
Both desperate and as pushy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a typical salesperson, right? Like it's so interesting to me because salespeople, like, they hate when a salesperson's really enthusiastic and excited trying to close and sell them, but then they go out and they do the same thing with their prospects and wonder why nobody's buying. I'm like, you're not understanding. Your tone is killing you. Now, so you're absolutely right. Enthusiasm. Now, I don't mean be boring, but you want to be more neutral, more unbiased, more collective. Okay, collective breeds confidence. Like, I'm assertive when I'm talking here right now, but I'm not overly enthusiastic. I'm not posturing. I'm not aggressive, but I'm still matter of fact. And that builds more respect in the prospect's mind because they view you more as an expert rather than a salesperson trying to stuff your solution down their throat.
So many distinctions you're dropping here. Expert,
Yeah.
not a salesperson. One of the reasons this is landing for me so strongly is
Yeah.
number one, I teach neutrality myself, but also in my other incarnation,
Yeah.
I am a Canadian seduction coach. And
Oh, really?
yes, I teach guys the same thing. You need to use different tonality and you need to contain your excitement and
Yeah.
come with genuine curiosity rather than what's my
Exactly. Yeah. The moment the prospect feels like you're just there to sell to them is the moment they emotionally shut down, and it's over most of the time. So you've got a curious tone. The next tone is more of a confused tone. Now, a lot of people, when they're like, what do you mean you can't act confused to the prospect? I'm like, well, it just depends on what you're talking about, because confusion causes a prospect to do what? Come to your rescue, clarify what you just asked. So if they say something, I might say, John, I'm not understanding. How did you mean when you said, see, that's a confused tone. Now they're going to interpret me saying like, John, walk me back. I'm not understanding. When you said blank, how did you mean by that? See, that's a confused tone. Now that confused tone causes them to feel like, oh, I didn't explain myself properly. I need to clarify what I meant. Now, why would I want that? Because I want them to clarify what they meant, because what happens? They start to relive the pain that they just talked about, right? So as they give me more clarification, I'm really doing it for them to build a bigger gap so they can relive pain that they were just describing more surface level, because I want them to relive it more under the surface, because that drives change. Right? Like, what's the biggest emotional driver in a human being that causes a human being to want to change?
fear?
It's pain and the fear of future pain, of what could happen, right? Those two things, right? Now, there's also, besides the curious tone, you got the confused tone, then you have more of the challenging tone. I call it the C's, all right? It's the challenging / skeptical tone. Now, I can't use challenging tone in the beginning of a conversation because I don't have a lot of trust or credibility in the first few minutes. But let's say I get 3/4 of the way through that first conversation. It depends on if you sell B2C or B2B, one step, a one call close compared to, a complex sales environment that might take months. So there's some differences there. But I might lean in and ask what's called the consequence question. Once they've started to see all these newfound problems, and once I've got them to see what their future is going to look like once they're all solved, I want to rip that away from them using a consequence question that gets them to defend themselves on why they need to change and change now, which builds massive urgency. But I have to use a skeptical tone to do that. So this is a generic version. I mean, I might lean in like, okay, but what if you don't do anything about this and XYZ gets even worse? See, that's a challenging tone. Now, that tone causes them to defend themselves, which I want, on why they have to change. Now, as a salesperson, all you're really selling is change. I mean, if you describe selling in one word, it's change. That's all selling is you're getting them to see what you're offering in a different perspective than how they saw it before. You're getting them to want to change their situation, right? Now, the fourth tone is the concern tone. The concern tone. So you've got the curious tone, the confused tone, not understanding. Help me understand. The confused tone. You've got the challenging tone. Well, what if you don't do anything? That's a challenging tone. And then you've got the concern tone. So I might lean in if they're on the fence and I can't help them overcome this concern or whatever. It's my last ditch effort. I might lean in. I'm going to put my hand on my chest, even if I'm on the phone, because that affects your what? Your body language affects your tone. Okay. But especially if they can see you. And I might lean in and I might say, Sally, what's really holding you back from moving forward?
Oh my God, I could
See,
see
that's
that.
a concern tone.
I could see in dating and relationships and everything else.
Yeah. So Sally now interprets that as what? That I'm concerned that her problems are not going to get solved and she's never going to get what she wants. So Sally is much more inclined to open up and tell me her real concerns. But if I don't use a concerned tone there that shows empathy, Sally is far less likely to ever open up to me.
This is profoundly different. No one other than you and me, I teach in a different way,
Yeah.
talks about tone, is even aware of it, much less teaches it. I'm sure in your seminars and all your ways of communicating.
Yeah. I find that really the only people or courses that really teach like advanced tonality, like I'm talking about, I mean, what I just showed you there was not really advanced. That's just kind of an overview. There's a lot more to that because some consequence questions, I'm going to start with a skeptical tone and then end it with a concerned tone. And there's different reasons for that, depending on the industry I'm in, right? But I don't really find, and I could be wrong, but out of all the sales training stuff I've ever seen, which I'm going to go out on a limb, I've probably seen the most of most sales trainers, there could be somebody, I'm not going to say that, there's situations, but the most tonality training I've ever seen that actually makes sense is by people who train actors and actresses how to act in films. Because what they do is they teach verbal pausing. So like when you're giving a speech, so I'm not into politics. Like I really play no sides here. I'm just kind of like, I'm just a sales trainer. We have clients that believe this. We have companies that believe this. They're all over, salespeople believe everything. Like we're just sales training company. We just focus to what I know. I don't know anything about politics. Okay. So I have no judgment when I say this. When I see politicians speak, I just look for how they communicate because I geek out on that stuff. So one really good politician when they speak was President Obama. So when he would talk, he would slow down his cadence. That's called verbal pacing. He's pacing out the speech. So what that did, that first thing, verbal pacing, when he would say something like a long paragraph or two, he would slow down and he would stop. And then he would talk about some of your issues and why they were happening and what they were going to do about those. See, that's verbal pacing. Now, what that causes the brain to do is engage where it's impossible for them to think about something else because they're hanging on to every word because of his verbal pausing. And because he's pacing that out with different verbal pauses in a sentence, it quite literally is almost impossible for you not to pay attention. Now, he does really good. And he also did what's called verbal cues. Now, verbal cues are little sounds out of your mouth. When somebody was talking like a reporter, because I always would geek out on this. I'd watch like reporters asking questions to a lot of presidents, okay? Some are great communicators, others suck, okay? And I'll give you a few other examples of ones that are not so good at communicating. But when the reporters would talk, he'd be like, and he'd listen to, right? But why did you ask that question? But why? See, that's a verbal cue. So while he was listening, he was using verbal cues to show them he was present in that conversation, which builds trust in them. Because it's like if you're on the phone with grandma and you're telling grandma your worst, like, I just broke up with my girlfriend, so horrible. You talk for 2 minutes and grandma doesn't say a word, no sounds. You're like, Grandma, you still there? Huh? Grandma, I can't. You don't think they're listening. So what he would do is he would show them he's listening by using those little verbal cues. Okay, but why did you ask that question? Just so I understand. But what? See that verbal cue. But why did you see that verbal cue bridges from question to question, which makes it conversational, not scripted. What most salespeople do is they ask a question on their script. The prospect talks for 3 minutes, which is another problem because they don't know how to tactfully interject. They don't know how to interject to clarify and probe. That's a whole nother thing we could talk about. And then at the end, they finish, they pause a couple of seconds, the salesperson does, and they say, okay, cool, awesome, yeah. Let me ask you, John, and it just sounds scripted. It sounds contrived. It doesn't sound human. And so the prospect emotionally shuts down.
Very interesting. I know your time is valuable. We'll leave in just 1 minute because this is amazing. I could sit across and talk over a dinner for hours with you because your ideas are so radically different. I am also
now. Can I give you another example? I'm going to stay a few more minutes.
Yeah, one more second.
Go ahead.
Trained as a hypnotist, hypnotherapy. I've been doing it for 30 years, and it's a classic technique in hypnosis that you have to pause to set up a command. I can't say, Jeremy, as you find yourself listening closely. If I were to say, I would say, Jeremy, as you find yourself listening closely to what it is I have to say.
Yeah, you're verbal pausing.
Yes. I'm not sure.
Verbal
I'm,
pauses are so powerful.
I'm not sure all the reasons you might think, this is really curious. So the other thing you can do is steal someone's verbal cue. Steal
Right.
someone who goes, a lot. You can just duplicate the sound without making it obvious. So it's called stealing an anchor. Please keep going. Give me another 5 minutes.
I love that. So like, President Obama is really good at that. Like if you ever watch Tony Robbins, you watch him on like YouTube and stuff, he'll get out in the audience and he'll ask a couple questions and he'll pause like right in the middle, and then he'll talk, then he'll pause. And then the person he's talking to just melts and starts getting really emotional. He's just using verbal pausing and verbal pacing to emotionally getting that, well, audience member, whatever you want to call a prospect, to really think deeper about what he's saying or asking. So in a sales situation, when you're asking questions and you know how to verbal pace the question out and pause, like, let me give you an example. If I want to ask a probing question and I want to focus on them thinking about what I'm saying, I might say, okay, but why so important to you now though? Now, notice how I emphasized now. So now they're thinking, oh, why is this important now? Like time frame. However, if I want a different response, I can literally ask the same question and say, why so important now though? And now they're focused on why it's so important, just by me emphasizing the word important over now. And I have a verbal pause between important and now. See how I can control the way their brain thinks from the question I'm asking by just emphasizing one word and then a verbal pause before the next words.
I gotta change it, twist around. This is so similar to what I teach my dating seduction clients. You're a married gentleman, correct?
No, I'm not. I'm divorced.
Oh, you're divorced, but you were. And when you
really good friends with my ex, though.
Okay, you have kids?
I do. Yeah, we have a child together. So really.
You practice this with your children, and kids are really smart. Can they pick up on it?
My kids kind of know what I do now because most of them are teenagers. Not my little 5-year-old, but most of my kids are teenagers, and they watch my reels. They've been watching my stuff for about 5-6 years. They don't know everything, but they know enough to be dangerous.
Jeremy, honestly, I can say you've been one of our very top guests, and we've had Richard Bandler of NLP and some other interesting people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I know, but I mean this real. I know people are going to so want to stay in a conversation with you. How can they best stay in that conversation? Do you have
the best place, there's a couple places. They can go to one of our free Facebook groups. That's probably a good place. They can go to salesrevolution.pro, salesrevolution.pro. There's, I think, that 80 some thousand salespeople in there and business owners. And we go live in that group about 3 to 4 times a week, different Q&As, different subject matter trainings. We give them some tips, little nuggets, right? If they ever want to get trained, obviously in our training courses for clients, they can always message us in there and reach out. That's not a problem. But if they want some little nuggets, little tips, that even those will help them sell more, have them go to that Facebook group, salesrevolution.pro. And we have a new book that just, it's in every major bookstore in the United States, Barnes & Noble bestseller. It's called The New Model of Selling. This is my first book I actually wrote. It just got published about 4 months ago. The New Model of Selling to an Unsellable Generation. And the biggest pet peeve I always had about pretty much not every book I've ever read, because I've got some friends in sales training that have written some really great books. But in most books, I noticed that sales trainers, they just kind of give a bunch of theory with really nothing tactical that's going to help you sell more. I'm just being real. There are some good ones, though. Don't get me wrong. That's not everybody. But I wanted to make sure in this book that people could walk away with like tactical, like skills, like here's the right questions. Here's how to disarm. Here's what to do if the prospect says this. Here's how to ask this question. Now, obviously, we can't teach advanced tonality in here because you're reading it. Can't teach that yet. The audiobook doesn't come out for like 6 to 12 months, so that'll be a while. Publishers make you do that. Publish a book, then the audio comes out a year later. But they can go to Barnes & Noble's website. So just barnesandnoble.com, purchase a book right there. It's 17, 18 bucks. If they need, if they don't have 17 or 18 bucks, let us know. We'll help them get a GoFundMe page so they can fund the book, $17, so they can go out and sell. I'm being cheeky. I'm always being sarcastic, but have them go get the book. Probably a good start at barnesnoble.com, and then salesrevolution.pro if they want to learn a little bit more about what we do. That's one of our Facebook groups, has tens of thousands of salespeople, and it's a good place to learn for sure. Thanks for having me.
Jeremy, you're amazing. I hope we can get you back on. We could do 3 episodes with you at the very least.
I'm not that cool. Now, if you have any future candidates for president or anything that want to learn verbal pacing, because I can tell you there's some that are really horrible at that. Okay, I'm not going to name names. All right. Here's what I would say. Every president on either side has their strengths and they have their weaknesses. Nobody's perfect, right? Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. So anyways, you have any presidents or future presidents listening that want to learn verbal pacing, verbal cues, verbal pausing, advanced tonality, they can always get with us as well.
No, but I do have someone I'll introduce you to who you'll find mind-blowing. Stay on the line with me. I want to have a brief conversation. Okay. Thank you, Tanner, for being on the Influencer's Edge. You're an amazing guest. We'll see you all next time.
The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform in any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. And finally, you'll get a free recorded audio training that will install unbelievable attitudes for success and wipe out any limiting beliefs. So if you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Thank you for tuning in to the Influencer's Edge, where you get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques so you can leapfrog over the pack in sales, influence, and persuasion. Remember to visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com to enjoy even more great episodes like this one. We look forward to seeing you again on the Influencer's Edge Show.